Stay tuned, stay tuned, stay tuned. As soon as I find the thing I'm supposed to be pushing. Here we go.
Feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches. It's
Raw Talk.
Not that long ago, the New Hampshire Union leader enthusiastically endorsed Governor Chris Christie for the Republican nomination for president. At the same time, the editorial staff at the paper, Grant Bossy, and publisher Joe McQuaid were making a giant word salad with candidate Donald Trump, and the words were not entirely civil. After the magic first-in-the-nation New Hampshire primary fairy dust settled, Mr. Trump walked away with almost 5 times as many votes as Mr. Christie, with just over 100,000 compared to Governor Christie's 21,000. Donald Trump in first, Governor Christie in sixth. Governor Christie dropped out of the race after that, and after resounding Trump wins in South Carolina and Nevada, Governor Christie has endorsed Donald Trump for president. Speaking at a press conference before a Trump rally in Texas, Governor Christie said, "The best person to beat Hillary Clinton in November on that stage last night is undoubtedly Donald Trump. They do not know the playbook with Donald Trump because he is rewriting the playbook." Does that mean the union leader has effectively endorsed Trump, if only vicariously, through Chris Christie? New Hampshire Rebellion, the latest in a long line of front groups advancing the progressive war on free speech, has announced the winners of its Granny D Awards. Granny D is a famous New Hampshire Democrat who spent years trying to silence free speech under the false flag of campaign finance reform. New Hampshire Rebellion's champions of this ongoing effort include Democrat Congressman John Sarbanes from Maryland, listed in the announcement as a Democrat, North Carolina Congressman Walter Jones, listed as a Republican who happens to have a sketchy conservative review rating of only 76. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, no party affiliation listed. New Hampshire State Senator David Pierce, no party affiliation listed. 5 New Hampshire Rebellion volunteers, no party affiliation, and the founder of Americans for Campaign Reform, John Rao. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, famous for owning a safe house for out-of-state vote stealers in the historic vote fraud district of Portsmouth, is a career left-wing Democrat. State Senator Pierce is likewise. So why did New Hampshire Rebellion deliberately exclude that information, not just in the bullet list of winners at the top of the announcement, but in the wordy, praise-filled bios for each that followed? The obvious answer is that to include such information makes New Hampshire Rebellion look like what it is, a shadow project of the far left that uses the public funding of elections as a wedge issue to attract dopey, ill-informed Republicans as bipartisan cover, while they build a list of names they can call on for more aggressive campaign finance reform sorties in the future. And yes, as a matter of fact, we have the proof and we've published it. Go to GraniteRock.com and search for an article titled New Hampshire Rebellion's Many Progressive Bedfellows. And to all those Republicans I keep telling to distance themselves from this group, it's not too late to run away from them. Frank Adelblut, New Hampshire House Republican and candidate for governor, has an editorial in this morning's Union Leader. In it he says, "Some argue that if we cannot come up with another funding mechanism, that Obamacare Medicaid expansion will simply cease. We were told the same thing in 2013 when it was initially authorized. It is also in direct contradiction to those arguing for reauthorization today. Those same voices say that it would be immoral to give people health insurance and then take it away. If it were immoral today, would it not be immoral in 2018 after they have had the benefit for 4 years and not just 2? 3 more people died this week, and over a dozen were wounded thanks to gun-free zones and laws disarming law-abiding citizens. 90 minutes after being served with a restraining order, 38-year-old Cedric Larry Ford of Newton, Kansas, walked through the Kansas factory where he worked with an illegally obtained AKM carbine and a Glock pistol, randomly shooting his co-workers. The first good guy with a gun on the scene shot and killed Ford. Bob Owens, writing at BearingArms.com, observed that we need employers to recognize that concealed carriers are the most law-abiding citizens in the nation. We need employers to understand that these law-abiding citizens with firearms can save and have saved countless lives, and that so-called gun-free zones only serve to empower those sick souls who desire nothing more than to lash against the world in hate. A handgun left at home or locked in the console of an employee's car isn't going to do anyone any good when shots break out on a factory floor or on the other side of the cubicle wall. Gun-free zones get people killed." Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
Raw
to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio, microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
I should have got it in white because it's harder to tell what it is. Anyway, we haven't done a WTF for a while, and there's so many to choose from, but I was driving up here and I was listening to something, and I was reminded of something that John Kasich said at the debate, which I thought was incredibly ridiculous and
let me
stupid.
guess it.
No
It's the same
guessing.
thing.
Let me talk.
Go on.
He's talking about how he's saving money in Ohio with Medicaid expansion. And it's like here's what we're doing. We're going to do this. We're going to say, hey, doctors, give great service and charge less. And if you charge the right amount of money, we'll give you something in exchange for that. and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Now
That's socialism. That's what.
that's fascism.
Yeah.
Well, I did enjoy his quote when he said, when you're talking about regime change, it's about regime change. It's a nice exercise in circular logic there.
So he's the...
He's been in government too long.
Yogi Berra. He's the Yogi Berra of politics.
Well, actually, I think that's Ben Carson because he...
Fruit salad of your life.
Yes, exactly. We want to learn about the fruit salad of your life. But the one that slapped me in the face of Kasich, because it was an interesting repeat, was over encryption and backdoors. You remember in the Fox debate a couple of weeks ago, it was like, let's not talk about that anymore, Megan. The president should get the heads of the tech companies in the Situation Room and close the door and get some sort of agreement out of them. And so they asked him again this time, and if I'm president, I'm going to take these guys in the back room at White House and lock the door. So,
Does that violate the Fifth Amendment?
Just about everything. The guy has no clue. He's unconstitutional. He's violated the elector's trust. He's violated the Constitution.
Hey, you're going to come in a room with some guys, and when you leave, we're going to have a plan.
That's how Hillary designed her health care plan. Right?
Yeah,
Remember that?
seriously.
The first one. Yeah.
Well, and the thing
Yeah.
that got me about Kasich,
Experts.
too, was when he was talking about religious liberty, that you should be able to believe anything you want within your house of worship, and I'm paraphrasing here. But, if you're a cupcake maker, you need to make cupcakes. And it's like, okay, so how are you different than Obama in this?
Not
I don't
at
see
all.
much.
Not at all.
Nothing at all.
He's been in government too long.
Well, the WTF is when he said in where he would fit between Bernie and Hillary. He actually thinks that there's a position for him between Bernie and Hillary. He said, one of them's too hot,
That's where he
one of
belongs.
them's too cold, but I'm just right.
Maybe.
Great, so you're a closet socialist too.
He's a mild and muddled form of unworkable socialism.
He's a communist baby bear. Hey, today on the program, guest host Greg Moore.
Morning.
Ed Nails joined us for a little bit.
Hey.
Chrissy Harbin's going to be coming in to talk about internet taxes. The now infamous Robert Stacey McCain, well, previously infamous and now famous Robert Stacey McCain will be
Famously
joining us.
infamous.
Excellent. Will be here to talk to us about getting banned from Twitter and the fun with feminists and a whole bunch of good things there. And then Michelle Lavelle is going to join us to talk about some education bills and education legislation. If you are not aware, you can check this out on Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, NHCRTheRock.com, and of course YouTube, Ustream, and GraniteGrok.com. You can follow us on Facebook. You
It's
can
getting
follow
very
us on
cozy in
Google.
Greg's corner.
And you can donate to support the program. So let's start. We touched on Medicaid, and we have a Medicaid situation going on here. And I believe Mr. Murphy is going to read something for us as a
Yes.
prelude to this discussion.
Yes, I will read it, and then we'll play Guess Who Said It? I think that it's probably a good step forward, talking about Medicaid expansion here in New Hampshire. I like the idea that we're moving forward without any taxpayer burden. Operative phrase here, any taxpayer burden. Any tax burden on the taxpayer's back. We have essentially a public-private partnership helping to fund it as we move forward, and those are very positive steps. What I would like to see is a long-term strategy for the state, not simply taking it in 2 or 4 year chunks. Who said it?
That would be Bill O'Reilly.
No. Who said it?
I already know, so I can't answer.
Let me see. Maggie Hassan.
All right, let's ask the person who brought me this quip.
It's actually Executive Counselor Chris Sununu who made that quote to Paul Steinauer in New Hampshire One in an interview this past week. And I got to tell you what, there's no taxpayer money other than, the $450 million in federal taxpayer money. So apparently, I don't know, maybe Counselor Sununu has found a way not to pay federal taxes. And if he has, I wish he'd tell me how to do that, because I can tell you, April 15th is coming fast.
Shouldn't they all just stand up and go, Alex, I'll take Medicaid expansion for $450 million?
Exactly. And so the biggest problem there is actually not that part of ignoring the federal taxpayer, because there seems to be sort of a pathology that exists within the State House and the Legislative Office building that federal taxpayer dollars sort of fall in from the sky somewhere. Maybe this, a giant plane airlifts and drops a crate of money, but they actually do come from. They look at it as
direct from helicopter man's hangar.
Exactly, a revenue source. They look at it as a revenue source, not actually taxpayers having to pay the money. So that's the first problem. But the bigger problem is the fact that not only does he want to extend Medicaid expansion, something that hasn't worked here in New Hampshire, but he wants to make it permanent. So it's not bad enough that he wants to extend it for 2 years, like even the folks in the House and Senate leadership want to do. He actually wants to make it permanent, which is even more staggering, because if you actually look at the numbers, there is some really disturbing stuff within this Medicaid expansion program. So one of the things NHPR found out was that among the Medicaid expansion, the people who are on Medicaid expansion, at a time when we have 3% unemployment in the state of New Hampshire, 57% of the people on Medicaid expansion are unemployed. 57%. And what's even more staggering is when you look at the income of the folks on Medicaid expansion, meaning they look at their last year's income, how much money they made in the last year. And again, our economy, there are jobs everywhere. I walk down Elm Street in Manchester, you can't help but trip over the help wanted signs. The people on Medicaid expansion, the amount of money they made in the past year, over 41% had an income of zero, meaning they made no income whatsoever. That's data from the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, and that means basically that the Medicaid expansion program is not a program for the working poor. It's for people who don't want to work, because in this environment, you ought to be able to get a job. These are able-bodied adults. By definition, they're not disabled people, they're not kids, they're not pregnant moms. Those people already have pathways to Medicaid. But this program is for people who simply, for the most part, are not working, who aren't working, and who
My
2/5
phone's
of
doing
them
something
haven't
weird.
worked at all over the course of the last year, and that's a pretty staggering figure if you think about it. And for Counselor Sununu to come out and say that there's no taxpayer dollars involved when there's $450 million in federal taxpayer dollars involved, and that we should make this program permanent. I don't know. It just shows that either he hasn't done his homework on the facts behind Medicaid expansion, or he's more focused on just trying to get as many federal dollars into the state as possible, regardless of whatever the source is.
I think it has to be the latter, because he's not economically illiterate. He runs a business, and he's a pretty good businessman.
Not this year, but that has more to do with the weather.
Yeah,
Correct.
But that doesn't make him less of a good businessman. If he rides it out and he lives to ski another day,
right,
that makes him a pretty good businessman. This year's just not a good year for skiing. My point is that the Republicans on the Executive Council are there for the express purpose to stand athwart progressives with their swords, yelling "Stop!" as they plunge the swords in.
But that assumes that only Democrats are progressives, and we know that to be a false statement. And this is basically Sununu telling us he's a progressive because he likes that government is giving more free stuff to people. And I hate the lie. And let's call it what it is, folks. When he says that there's no tax burden, he's lying. So right off the bat, we know that the governor wannabe can't tell the truth. Because all of us are, except for those people who are unemployed willingly, are generally federal taxpayers. Albeit, yes, 45% of all wage earners don't pay any federal income tax at all. But for us that do, thanks for the smack in the face, because as I've used before, we're the ones who are looking up through the local, the county, the state, and the federal level. It doesn't matter to us where this cost-shifting food fight is coming from. We have to pay it all. And for Sununu to basically dismiss, I don't care that you're paying taxes, it shows you a willingness to suspend belief in reality. And the other thing that's two other things, real quick. their own fact sheet on the bill. The fiscal note says in 4 years, it's going to be $50 million out of New Hampshire taxpayers. Where's that money going to come from there, Chris? And also, a public-private partnership. Well, that means we have yet another Republican happy to do crony capitalism because of Jeb Bradley's Bradley Care, setting up basically a monopoly for the hotels, right? For the hospitals in these various areas. So they can charge what they want to now, the exact opposite of what Maggie Care was. But Bradley Care says, we're going to give you the monopolies in your area, but you have to voluntarily give us money. And I am just waiting to see how voluntary really is. Because voluntary has the idea that you can say no. We're going to ask for this money, but can the hospitals really say no?
Nice little monopoly you got there. Shame if something would have happened to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's another piece of it, and this is something that we learned. So, I mean, when I was involved in the federal government in the mid-'90s and then working at the Department of Health and Human Services in 2006, there was welfare reform in both of those. One of the things, the first thing you learn is it's bad public policy to ever give any welfare program to able-bodied adults that doesn't involve an honest-to-goodness work requirement. And the work requirement in the bill basically says it's a work requirement as long as everybody says it's okay. So you can't find a judge to say no. You can't find a federal agency to say no. So as soon as anybody says no, then the work requirement goes away. But if it's denying people an incentive to go out and get to work, we're actually hurting those people because these people are the people who most need to get along with their career and begin to move forward in their lives. And by having these jobs that are unfilled across the state of New Hampshire, BET revenue, and it's costing the state BPT revenue because that business can't grow.
And kids grow up in a household where they see the parents don't work, and then you have the generational aspect of this, just family-destroying aspect of this. And it'll build in, the overspending builds into a crisis, and there's only one way to solve a crisis, right?
Yeah, more taxes.
Broad-based tax.
And at
That's
that
how you
point,
solve a crisis.
Gulch comes into play here.
Then less people should have any incentive to work whatsoever in New Hampshire, and you're into a Detroit spiral.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. How many people can be riding in that wagon before the people... rolls.
Well, one of the things they did is they actually said to the food stamps, on the food stamp side of things, they said you need to go to work. You need to go to work, and it actually had the bottom drop out of it. And if you look at here in New Hampshire, in 2006, when we passed pretty tough welfare reform, when I was working under then Commissioner John Stephen at Health and Human Services, we passed a tough a tough welfare reform package for TANF, the cash assistance program. Once we passed that and said you actually have honest-to-goodness work requirements, the enrollment dropped off a cliff. There has to be work requirements, and as Ed said, you have to have in these families. Now, most of these people are childless adults on Medicaid expansion, but in these families, they need to have that right basically mentor. They need to have role models where they see their parents going to work every day. It's a hugely important phase, not culturally. The tax dollars are important, but culturally, it makes a huge difference.
All right, hang on. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
Well. Welcome back to Grok Talk. Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, Greg Moore, and Ed Nail is with us. Talked about some Medicaid expansion, but, you know, a week, maybe even a day doesn't go by when we don't have some new and exciting information on the voter fraud front, and this is new and exciting.
And it's international.
It's international.
It's international,
So
which we all love.
International vote fraud now.
Well, here's what we have. I think yesterday, day before, the new Project Veritas Action video came out. And it shows the antics of several Australians who came here to work for Bernie Sanders. The Australians that came here are part of the Australian Socialist Workers' Party.
Not even their Labour Party.
They have Labour Party member, too. The one Labour Party guy, I believe, is Sandeep Saranthi. So they have the Socialist Worker Party paid for them to come here.
So basically, Indian communists have gone to Australia for freedom to join the Socialist Workers' Party of Australia.
I guess it works there, too. So we got Ben Kremer, who was the guy actually jumping out of the van and tearing up Hillary signs. Can't blame him for that. And he was going after the other ones from the Donald, his signs. Michael Quincy was involved. Rebecca Doyle, that's the girl that I probably will not be able to find because it's such a common name. And then Sandeep Saranthi. They have him as Saranth on the video, but it actually has a Y on the end. And I was in contact. I sent an email off to the Brisbane Times of Australia. They apparently have a member of their house or whatever, their parliament, is already ticked off about this and started an investigation into how did these Australians get a free ride to Manchester, New Hampshire. Oh, we're speaking of free rides.
Yeah,
Rebecca,
that's interesting. Did the Socialist Workers' Party of Australia send them to help out fellow socialists, or did the Bernie campaign pay them? And either way, it's looking very questionable.
We're all going to discover that here on Granite Grok and CNHT's website. You know, we're going to find that out. But what I found out so far since 2:45 this morning was I reviewed the tape a couple times. Now, remember, I was out with Project Veritas, and I've met the people that did these films, so I pretty much know who's speaking on the blank side of the camera. And the girls are very, very good. No guy will not talk to these girls. That's the first thing you learn. So they went in there with their black yoga pants, and they got the information, by goodness. So they got this Kremer tearing down signs, and they got Rebecca Doyle was answering some questions about how they got there. And so they were picked up by Thorpe at the Manchester airport.
By who?
Thorpe. That's the only... Well, I went in a little deeper into the FEC filings, and I found a guy named Benjamin Thorpe.
Ooh.
And Benjamin Thorpe got paid by the Bernie Sanders staff. So there's already a payment to him between January 1st and now on the FEC filings on the basically here's who we paid. So I haven't gotten into Benjamin Thorpe's address from that actual check. That's where I'm headed next. And I'm going to send Benjamin Thorpe's name off to my background people and to my checklist people and see if he lives in New Hampshire, where he's from. But Thorpe is the guy. We have one guy, Benjamin, so far. If anybody thinks I've said anything that I shouldn't, they can always contact me, have their attorney contact me, Ed Nail, 831-2031 here in New Hampshire.
Or email you at?
It's ednail at Comcast.net. Real easy, ednail at Comcast.net. Have your attorney contact me.
Not hiding, are you?
No, I've been waiting 15 years for somebody to have their attorney contact me.
That's a bit like Glenn Beck's red telephone.
Yeah, the first...
Van Jones, call me.
The first scumbag dirtballs we caught were the bus of 22 people that went to Bear Brook Park and voted from the imaginary road.
with an imaginary house on it when the park was closed. So the park closes in October. They voted in November from Deerfield, and I put their names on the internet in 2005.
The only thing real about was the votes, which counted.
The votes count.
Yeah.
So we know that. The AG's office knows that. They've been playing this game for a long, long time. So I'd like to say one thing. Voter fraud in New Hampshire begins and ends at the Attorney General's office. And if they don't like that, they can do something about it, too. So I was with Project Veritas. So if they want to take any legal action against them, I'd like to go along with them. So bring this extra set of cuffs for Ed Nail.
And what is the attorney, the person sworn to uphold the law? Who's the head of the election law in the Attorney General's office?
Stephen Lobotomy. Steve Labonte is the head of it, and he is in over his head right now. He's got to have more stuff that he can possibly do. But right now we're going to be looking for these guys and see if we can't stir up a little trouble in Australia. There's a little time difference, but I have all the time in the world. Send this stuff down there and watch them get investigated by the Australian.
It's easy. Just kick back with a beer in the evening, and it's Australian morning time.
Right now, everybody out there in listening land, we are looking for Benjamin Thorpe, maybe of New Hampshire. That's a whole little different aspect to this. The other thing we have is there is a lot of tape. And here's how this Veritas project works. They send these very attractive girls out with these little tiny cameras and a button in their shirt, and they go in and they go work in the Hillary campaign.
In a position guaranteed to have people make eye contact?
Absolutely guaranteed. And no matter which way they're facing, they're in there, and they've got their camera, and they pick up this information. They bring it back to the command center, and then they transcribe it. So they have to make a transcript of the 15, sometimes 18, 20 minutes. That all gets transcribed.
Hard.
So as they're doing that, I'm reading it. So I got to read a lot of transcripts, at least important parts. They go, Ed, is this illegal? Ed, what statute? Ed, how can you prove this? So they have a guy that puts the tape together and another guy that meshes it. So there's a guy that puts the tape together, there's a guy that put the dialogue together, and then some of what you hear O'Keefe say, they'll go, Ed, get on your soapbox. And I'll say, here's the question. And that's what you hear O'Keefe say on the tape, saying things like, Veritas was here in 2012. This is 2016. Doesn't look like much has gotten fixed, has it? It's that kind of stuff. So I get to do that. And so I've seen a lot of the tape that no one else has seen. And this Stephen Lobotomy at the AG's office is now sending these half of subpoenas out to Project Veritas to get all their film. Well, let's all pray that happens, because I'd like everybody in New Hampshire to see every single second of film that they took, because I've seen it, and there's some fabulous names that need to be released that they haven't felt comfortable doing with Project Veritas. Hopefully, with the help of that idiot at the Attorney General's office, we can get all that tape released to the public, and we can spend the next couple of years going over this.
They won't release it.
I think they will if it benefits them. So Project Veritas will make a lot more news by following the advice of the Attorney General's office and releasing all the raw footage for us to go through, because we know the names of the state senators. We know the names of the attorney husbands of famous people. We know all these names, so we'll get to see. They don't really know them,
So more to the point, if the request is to hand over all of the footage, all they need to do is upload the entire damn tranche of
everything to
YouTube and say, here, Mr. Attorney General, it's all on YouTube.
All right there.
And by the way, we've notified all the press outlets as well.
And it's untouched. It's in its raw form, from the two blonde bombshells, the alluring brunette, and the other fellows that worked there, the big guys, the little guys. The one guy that had the hair all over the place. It looked, how they put a pot on your head and cut it in the old days for a haircut?
Yes.
He put the pot on his head, and then they hook it up to 110 electric. And then they send him out, and as soon as he walks in the door, they're going, this is a Bernie supporter. Got to be. Doesn't comb his hair. Right? So they have, and then these guys went off and went to the other states. So some of these people have been followed from New Hampshire to Nevada and other states. So we're not done with these guys yet. We're waiting for them to vote again March 1st. And they're such idiots, and they're such involved in their campaigns, they're not even going to hear any of this. Yeah. So hopefully we'll come back with them voting this, here, and there. And then we go right back to Steve Labonte and say, why don't you prosecute this?
That two-edged sword is called discovery. Such an important word, because
I like to refer to it as a double-edged sword, but go ahead.
Well, yes. Two-edged sword, double-edged sword. Same thing is going to cut both ways. And do you think that the AG's office understanding, because they track us.
Oh, yeah.
They go to Mike's house. My picture falls out of their folders.
Yeah, come to my house.
And they say, we know who you are. We listen to your stuff. We read what you write.
Yeah, come to my house. 61 Tubs
We
Hill
watch
Road.
your speeches.
They're trying to push up your listenership. That's okay, right?
Fine
We'll
by
take
me
it.
because,
Maybe they should sponsor the show. You should ask the AG Justice.
In a way, they are.
yeah. I mean,
Should we put that
I just
as a
look
trailer?
at this and go, do you really think that they would ever follow through with that because of exactly what you said before? We know who all the state senators are, the important names and all that. Do you think they're going to go, crap, and
I think
not
they're
do
that
anything?
stupid. I think.
Really?
I think they think they're going to find something on the Veritas tapes that they can go after Veritas with.
Well, yeah.
And I think that'll blow up in their face. They will have no eyebrows left when this is over with. They'll just be, or a mustache if they have one. Even the women. If they
I
have,
really
they're
do
gone.
believe that they ought to be go ahead, issue that subpoena. Project Veritas ought to demand, if you want to see it, it was sort of like Apple right now.
Right.
You want to force it? Be our guest.
Yeah.
No.
Or release snippets.
Yeah.
No, I would
say, well, okay, we're too busy to give it all to you, but we'll give you this right now, and then boom, drop it. So I'd like to see that. There's some of it's really great, and
if Project Veritas needs some help with some of the editing and snipping of the video, I will put Granite Rock's resources to their assistance.
That's what we need to do.
I bet they're more professional than we are, judging by some of what's going on. But yeah, wouldn't it be fun?
They will be. But if they just need somebody to slam stuff up to YouTube, more than happy to help. Because I'll do it with a really big smile.
Yeah, Rich Gerard, Manchester, he's offered to do some of this. We had the Veritas video on immediately. I was only allowed to release it on February 9th at 7 a.m. And my voter fraud radio program starts at 6:40.
Yeah.
So at 6:40, I had to spin my wheels till 7, and then we played the first Veritas
and
video.
We put it up at 7:30.
You guys put it up same. Yeah, we were getting the same stuff basically all the same time.
Yeah.
But we have different avenues. I mean, Rich Gerard beams right into Manchester in drive time with AM radio.
Right.
This people can pull up any time. So it's getting more dangerous for them to try and hide voter fraud. The public knows. And these videos are great. They were here in 2012. We took no actions to resolve that, and it all falls on the shoulders of the AG's office. That's where it starts and ends. I learned this in 1996 when I first dealt with them, and I owe them. They gave me the club to beat them with in 1996, and I've been at it ever since. And now it's getting better. The last 5 years have been really good. I'm expecting the next couple of years are going to be really, really good.
You know what I think that Project Veritas ought to do is to find somebody that will ask Maggie Hassan, listen, what are you doing about this voter fraud? All this information that's coming out, what is your Attorney General's office going to do? Do you know if anybody's asked Maggie that question?
Not that I know of
Given
yet.
that she's running to take away the junior senator seat from Kelly Ayotte.
Maybe I should wait till like 4 days before the election and ask her.
Yeah, by the way, did Kelly Ayotte, when she was running the office, did she ever do anything about voter fraud?
Absolutely not that I know of. And in fact, we were set upon by that office, our taxpayer group in Bedford. At the time, they almost extorted basically $10,000 out of our group. They tried to charge us with false, putting up signs on public property that were not political signs, when in fact they were. And the town of Bedford could not have pursued us for doing that without the help of the AG's office. Long story, but that's what happened there. So we have a lot of. I'd love to discuss all this. If the AG's office wants to go through it, I'm available. And remember, everything they do with me and Veritas would be before a New Hampshire jury. So I'm pretty sure we're not going to a judge. We're going to a jury.
Okay.
And I can't see a New Hampshire jury thinking voter fraud is funny. So I'm counting on that instead of a judge.
Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at it from the political standpoint that, if
Just to interrupt, sorry, we were having some issues with some streaming audio, and we believe it's been fixed. So go ahead, please.
Yeah. I mean, we on the right look at the Democrats as being absolutely they don't want to pursue the voter fraud. But I brought Kelly Ayotte's name up, because she's running against Maggie Hassan.
She had an opportunity to do it.
She had the opportunity to do the right thing, to
put our entire voter database online like Vermont has, right now I send an email to Vermont. Vermont sends me their entire database. So I can track all the Bernie voters that voted here back to Vermont from my office. No problem. We need to put that on the internet. We need to make it a statute that says if you're an election official and you knowingly coach, endorse, help, supply, do whatever to help someone break an election law, you lose your position. Now, I would never ask that you be arrested because that would never happen. They protect the hive, but you lose your position. If you ever want to be an election official again, you have to go to Superior Court and get their permission to do it, where we would get a chance, the public, to discuss that. We need to make the AG's office either responsive or elected, one or the other. There's about 4 or 5 things we could do and correct us, and we're going to lose.
One of the things, Ed, that we looked at back in 2012 was actually moving election enforcement from the Department of Justice over to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State, of course, being the chief election officer of the state, and saying, well, shouldn't the enforcement of those laws belong within the Secretary of State?
Because even though Bill Gardner is a Democrat, Bill electoral process
Absolutely.
And first in the nation meaning something, which right now, thanks to Republicans and Democrats alike, Kelly Ayotte and Labonte, and others in between, and our election integrity is worthless.
And I will tell you that it is such a low priority in the Department of Justice. I mean, it couldn't be a lower priority. I'm pretty sure that when you've come to the Department of Justice and you've done something wrong, that's how you know you've done something wrong, because you get stuck with election law.
Wow. Yeah, and I have a team of like 2 people.
One attorney and one half of a retired state police officer.
And if they say they don't have any money, there's $5,000 in fines for each one of these. I know they can pick up $50,000 a year real easy for an extra employee by prosecuting 10 of these guys, and I hand them over. I mean, here like this Carl Gibson. Here is his driver's license from Kentucky, and he's voting here. He renewed it between the time he voted the first time and the time he voted again. He voted in Wisconsin, and he renewed his driver's license in person in Kentucky. I sent that off to Steve Labonte, and he says, "Oh, you don't have enough evidence of voter fraud, dismissed." If we had a statute that said they shall, not may, shall prosecute voter fraud, then I could bring a writ of mandamus, and we wind up in court with people watching this whole thing happen in public rather than just doing it here.
Greg, how hard would that be to get a law passed by the Republican majorities?
I think first and foremost, I think that you get it through the House and Senate. Probably would go through, get it through a governor. Well, I mean, obviously we've had governors who have been sort of antithetical to actually improving the integrity of election laws in the state of New Hampshire for a while now.
Yeah, Shaheen vetoed voter ID 3 times, Lynch at least twice, and Hassan's done everything she can to veto good election law. But these are federal elections. Our primary is considered a federal election for federal officers, so hopefully we see some change at the federal level as well. They could put an end to this. And this year, in 2016, I was with Veritas. In 2014, I was in Nashua with Judicial Watch. And if somebody like Judicial Watch comes along and says, yeah, New Hampshire is ripe for the pickings, which this helps, there's another avenue as a federal lawsuit if it looks like they'll get them enough publicity. And I think this could,
All right,
let's hope we can fix it. You got to end the segment there,
This
Steve?
is a good spot to end a segment, and we're going to move on to a new topic as soon as I finish editing and closing this picture of Greg that I just posted on Facebook, who, by the way, is not following Grok Talk on Facebook. You got to fix that. Do it right now. Because I go to put your name in it, it doesn't tell me, Greg,
give us your phone. Come on, turn it over.
We're going to set this up for you. All right, hang on. We're going to come right back and talk about maybe some business taxes or some asset forfeiture. Who knows? We'll be right back. It's Grok Talk. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
All right, we're back. Grok Talk, lots of talking, not as much grokking. Well, we've had some grokking and some talking, and that's what we're here for.
Understanding fraud in fullness. That's
Understanding
grokking.
all kinds of fraud.
My favorite
like asset
band.
forfeiture, for example.
Absolutely.
Which is a great topic, and it never gets enough discussion, even though
So you
we
lose your
hear
van.
about it all the time.
The notion of civil asset forfeiture started with a lot of organized crime. That was a big issue. And then obviously with the expansion of a lot of the drug dealers, where people were making all this ill-gotten money, and when they arrested them, that the government wanted to get a hold of the ill-gotten money. The problem is the money was then taken and given back to the police departments, so it was almost like a bounty. So they created a system that sets up enormous disincentives. So what you see now is civil asset forfeiture is being applied in places where there's no criminal conviction.
Disincentives are huge incentives.
Well, there's no disincentives, but there's huge incentives for policing for profit. When people see,
nicely put,
Human nature.
You've created a ground that makes it right for people to want to get a hold of the money, and law enforcement from the top to the bottom looks at it as an opportunity to create off-budget revenue stream, and it has huge problems. There's been a number of groups that have been working through the years, the ACLU, the Institute for Justice, the Center for Individual Rights, who've worked with a lot of people with no criminal conviction who've had their money taken from them. And by the way, by taken, I mean stolen from them. Talking about people who, say, own a convenience store, which is a cash business, who go to the bank and drop off maybe $7,500 and $8,000. That might be the day's receipts. And all of a sudden, the law enforcement jumps in and says, and by law enforcement, I'm not just talking about police. I'm talking about some of the Department of Justice officials will jump in there and say, "Aha, you're structuring your payments to avoid the $10,000 investigation," and then suddenly they take large quantities of money away from these people, which puts them out of business. And their attitude is, unfortunately, the standard to take the money is more likely than not, but the standard to get it back is clear and convincing, which means it makes it very easy for the law enforcement to grab the money from the people, and very hard for the people who've had the money stolen from them to go and get it back. So one of the things that we're working on here in New Hampshire with AFP is try to reform the civil asset forfeiture systems in two dimensions. First of all, there has to be a conviction relative to what you think the money was garnered from. Now, if you pull over somebody who's got a lot of cash in their car, and you pull them over and you convict them for reckless driving, that's not enough to keep their money. So there needs to be there should be a conviction relative to how the money, where the source of the money should have come from, and secondly, it's also about where the money goes. So there's a big debate right now. There's legislation that's passed the policy committee, going to the House Finance Committee. Who knows where it'll go through the process, but that would take that money and put it in the general fund, meaning there would no longer be an incentive for these law enforcement agencies to try to get that money as soon as they can. There's a couple examples that was raised in a forum that we had last month. The AFP worked with a number of other groups, ACLU, Institute for Justice, Charles Koch Institute, to bring more attention to this issue. One of the issues that was raised from the person from the Institute for Justice is a highway in Tennessee.
Yes.
There's a highway in Tennessee, and on that highway, the drugs come in one way and the cash goes out the other way. Now, if the goal was to stop drugs, the police would be on the side that drugs were coming in. And what they found from a study was that 80% of the stopping was on the sides where the cash was going out. So there wasn't an incentive for the police to try to actually stop the drugs, because drugs are no good to them. They just usually destroy them. But if they are on the other side and they arrest them going back the other way, they can get the cash and keep the cash. So that's just a great example of how civil asset forfeiture skews incentives and ultimately can hurt ultimately can end up hurting the actual goals of law enforcement, which should be obviously to focus on stopping the crime, not grabbing the money.
Yeah, and what we've seen
is
that it's all
over
in a lot of places where they're just picking off innocent people who just happen to have cash with them, not associated with any kind of drugs, just regular tourists going through the South. And
there was an example of someone
Midwest.
driving. He was moving to California, was stopped in Arizona.
Yep.
He had his life savings in cash in his car. They grabbed the money, and
he's all done.
He's done, and he can't get it back. And so the Institute for Justice is working with him to sue the local authorities to try to get his cash back. If it was just up to him, the cost of trying to reclaim that money would probably exceed the money if he could afford it, which he probably can't. And so there are groups out there who, like the Institute for Justice, who are working with these business owners, individuals who've had their cash seized from them to try to get their money back.
In New Hampshire, I know I think 1995, we had to change the laws. It was House Bill 154 and 155 at the time, if I remember correctly. Towns used to be able to take a piece of property for back taxes, and they kept the whole thing. Now you take a property for back taxes, and if they owe you $10,000, they take the $10,000, sell the property, and the other $90,000 goes back to the owner or for other things. But it used to be we were taking property. I think it was a German firm that didn't get their tax bills, and then some New London, I think it was New London, where they took the property from the guy. So we have this. I mean, it's natural for municipalities to say, hey, here's an opportunity to make some revenue at someone else's expense, and it costs them too much to defend themselves from it. It's a natural progression. It's human nature. So we have to find some way of allowing people to conduct their lives and not be considered a criminal just for getting pulled over with money.
Otherwise, you return to Robin Hood, where the citizens band together and go destroy the castle to get their money back.
And by the way, it's important to point out that we still support that if you are engaged in illegal activity that's producing revenue, we still think that money should not stay with you, so that you're able to keep.
But you got to prove it.
But exactly, number one, you have to get a criminal conviction to show that there was a crime that took place, and the other thing is where does the money go?
And exactly, it can't go to the police. It just can't.
Well, certainly not to the local police, where there's a direct incentive.
When this legislation came before the Criminal Justice Committee, I was talking with Gilles Bissonnette, who's with the ACLU here in New Hampshire, and he said he pointed out that the law enforcement came and said two fairly contradictory things. Number one, we're not talking about a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, but we can't live without it.
And that's the thing that drives me the craziest, because when Loretta Lynch, let's give props to where it's due. When Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General of the United States, said, stop this, and put a hiatus on it, it froze all that. And now the big cities here in New Hampshire, such as they are, Nashua, Manchester, a couple others, are all crying poor mouth. Well, I'm sorry. If this is so necessary, you ought to be going to your councilors, your mayor, your budget committees, wherever, and say, look, here is something that absolutely has to be done, and we need the money for it. They shouldn't be relying on slush funds to be able to do this kind of stuff. And you're right, Greg, you brought up that it really does distort the budgetary process.
Yeah, it's money and voters didn't approve. It's not appropriate.
I mean, I'm a big believer that everything should go into the general fund and everybody should compete for it. Just generally, I think it's a good idea to have everybody have a balance of trying to determine what's really important societally and what's less important, and let those funding streams. The flip side is, if up in here in Concord and it's just a sort of a natural affliction, every single group wants their own dedicated revenue stream, so they don't have to compete with every other need or potential need that might show up.
No, and you're right. And now we've got Kelly Ayotte here. Her name is going to go through my lips again, trying to put a bill through to restore that asset forfeiture program, and we're going to end up in the same way. Now, it's not as abused from what the studies have shown here in New Hampshire, but in all the other places that will be the beneficiary of that, you can have people like in Philadelphia. They are known for taking houses away from perfectly innocent people and going, oh, well, sorry, we already sold it. Too late.
Do you think Ayotte has a meeting where they sit down and go, which parts of the base haven't I disenfranchised yet? The civil asset forfeiture people. All right, let's go piss them off.
Yeah, it's their campaign manager.
And one other thing I want to say is people in law enforcement, the vast majority of them that I know try to do the right thing. But when you've given them such a bad set of incentives,
and everyone else is doing it,
and everybody else is doing it, it's really a case where I think we're really skewing their focus. And the Tennessee example is the most perfect example of that. Of the law enforcement should be focused on stopping the drugs from coming into Tennessee. They should be less focused on trying to grab as much money.
Well, yeah, because they're just in the drug business. That's all. They are not selling the drugs, but they are reaping the benefit of the sale of the drugs.
It wouldn't pay to have that stop.
But this keeps coming up over and over again. There was this young YAF guy, Young Americans for Freedom. It's usually a campus group. He had been selling, doing some fundraising, and was traveling to a not a synopsis, but a
symposium or something.
Symposium of that type. He was carrying cash in his luggage to bring and to be able to give it, and they took it from him. $8,000-9,000. I mean, it's another perfect example of somebody, a citizen, not having anything to do illegally, and they just arbitrarily said, "Well, that much money, you must be doing something wrong."
Well,
and the police have now turned into basically the executive branch, and also the judiciary and the executioner. I mean, they're doing all three branches: executive, legislative, and judiciary.
Right, and the other thing is the standard of evidence.
I am the law.
The standard of evidence has to be
no
equalized.
Judge Dredd, friends.
Well, I
am the law.
No, the standard of evidence for taking the money from the citizen needs to be the same.
He's having a fit.
From the citizen to get the money back. I think that's important. So if you make it an easier standard for law enforcement to take it away from the individual than from the individual to reclaim their money, I think that's another problem.
Yeah.
The other unfortunate part of this is when William Jefferson during Katrina had the National Guard go to his house and get all the money out of his freezer.
Yes.
Cold Cash Jefferson.
He could have lost that. Somebody could have picked that up.
He should have. Well,
I mean,
look what
he's not the only congressman with a bunch of money in his freezer. Come on.
He was first a judge that got thrown out because of malfeasance. Then he becomes a congressman, gets thrown out again, and then gets reelected. And we're worried about electing Trump or Bernie?
No, and then that brings us to Charlie Rangel, who just announced that after 4 decades of graft and corruption that he's going to retire a wealthy and happy man, and nobody's going to do a thing.
My guess is you won't see Charlie in Harlem very often after he retires.
He'll be in that beach photo
exactly.
with his beached whale ass on the...
Yeah, but what's he going to do? He owns the 2 side-by-side rent-controlled apartments.
Oh, he can still sell those.
He can't sell them, and he can't move out of them.
Well, it's a revenue stream when he's down
It's a revenue stream.
It's a revenue stream when he's he's down in Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic. He
could have an insurance fire.
Exactly.
There's a lot of options available to a man with his connections.
He can take the Reverend Sharpton with him after
Trump wins.
President
I love that line.
Him,
for those who don't understand, this is an inside joke. I found the thing on Breitbart that said Al Sharpton has declared that if Donald Trump becomes president, he's moving out of the country. I'm voting for Trump.
Not a one has any of these people.
I know, all 2004. Remember 2004?
I'm going to move if you vote for this guy. They're still freaking here.
Yeah, Canada would be overloaded by now if they all.
Let us be clear. The progressives are staying because they're gradually winning. Mm-hmm. It'll be the conservatives that leave if the country tips over the edge.
We're all going to go to Texas for the secession.
Yes.
Yeah,
and they won't. They'll have to let us go.
Or New Hampshire. I'll tell you that much. Now that the Free State Project's triggered their move, the New Hampshire secession movement might actually take place.
This is going to be rather interesting. I wonder what's her name, Kathy, the one who said, "Let's make New Hampshire an inhospitable place."
Oh, the state rep from Keene.
Yeah, I forget.
Kathy Nobody from Keene.
State rep. Cynthia Chase.
Cynthia Chase. Yeah, she must have just plotted.
The transplant from Rhode Island.
Yes, she must have just plotted. That's a Yiddish word. I'm not going to translate. When she heard the news,
They'll just bring in 20,000 out-of-state voters to balance things out.
It's funny. What happens if Kelly Ayotte loses by like 3,000 votes?
Most of us will laugh.
We expect her to lose by about as much as Happenstein or Brown.
She decided to take all her money and drive across the state with it and get pulled over for speeding. That'd be like karma, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
So here's the thing. I wanted to get back to Kelly and vote fraud, because if she loses, vote fraud will be part of it, although her lack of character will be the other part. So
that would be too sweet if she lost. Thanks
to Kelly's malfeasance and the vetoes of several Democrat governors, all her friends and family have basically lost elections. Charlie lost twice. Frank lost. John E. lost. Scott Brown lost. I mean, all of these people could reasonably have won their elections if they were not tainted.
Bill O'Brien got reelected.
Yeah, they tried hard to keep
man
him.
in America, I think.
They tried to keep him out of the house.
Yeah, but if it's not close, they can't cheat.
Every waking
popular
moment
back
they
home.
tried to keep him out. So
Well, you look at now Papa Smurf. You know, his family was backing John Kasich. You know, he's just being a vanity candidate at this point in the presidential race. But you know, who have they backed that's been winning lately?
Nobody. You know, I'm still trying to figure out whether the Sununus avoided Bush because they knew he had no chance, or whether Bush avoided the Sununus because they'd done nothing useful for the Bushes in the last few cycles.
I feel that I've won this election already because Bush is gone. You know, from the moment he said no mas, I was a happy man. So it's all over as far as I'm concerned. The Bush dynasty is broken. I won't have to see them again.
Oh, wait.
I don't think they'll throw another one out there.
They're growing another one in Texas. He's now the Texas Land Commissioner.
When he goes for the hundreds of millions of dollars, they're going to go, wait a minute. I remember what happened the last time.
It's pretty amazing how in Texas they elect apparently every statewide office ever gets elected. They have the ballots in Texas have got to be like a New Hampshire primary ballot, where literally every single position, railroad commissioner,
toilet paper roll. You know, exactly. You just go.
How do you have any? How do you keep tabs? How does any citizen keep tabs on all these people?
You know, I put up a post last night on exactly that, where how can we keep up with government and what it's going, not even the candidates and what they're saying, but just what government is doing, both at the legislation level, because we here in New Hampshire, just New Hampshire alone, 1,000 bills a year. How do you keep up with all that stuff?
Isn't that the purpose?
I mean, right, and then all of the rules that come out of the executive branch, and then you do that at the county level, you do it at the local level, you do it at the federal level. I mean, we are about as news and political junkies as it gets.
And we can't follow it all.
We can't.
No.
You do this full time and you can't follow it.
No, it's not possible. And I mean, I used to work in the House of Representatives as the policy director and then the chief of staff, and I couldn't keep tabs on all the bills in front of the House and where each one of them was. It's just not possible. You have to have a little bit of faith in the chairs of each committee that they're going to take their bills and manage them appropriately. But I got to tell you what, I mean, the good news is we're incredibly decentralized here in New Hampshire. It's we push a lot of the responsibility back down to people who are state reps who, frankly, in theory, should be well connected to their community. It doesn't take a lot of money to run for state reps, so it's not like you're constantly chasing after donors. It's a little bit different dynamic in the Senate where you need $50,000, $75,000 to run, where you're more connected to your donors than maybe you are with your constituents.
How much did Dave Booten spend?
But if you look at the state reps, a lot of those races are $500 or less.
Yeah.
So it's not about where's my next campaign contribution coming from. So I mean, people often make fun of the New Hampshire House, but I tell you, there's some genius there. There really is.
I tell people, I was interviewed in North Carolina radio a couple of weeks ago. They said, you have 400 members? I said, I know. I wish it was 6. Nothing would get done and we'd all be safe. And they're shocked. 400. Yeah.
400.
Well,
It's a great number.
It works great. And, you know, not only that, they recycle their signs from campaign to campaign. Even the limp cardboard ones that got rained on get put back out the next year.
All right, we got to go. Chrissy Harbin's up next. We're going to talk about Utah and an interesting Republican tax proposal. Stay tuned. This is Grok Talk.
It's the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of CNHT, GraniteRock.com, this station, or anyone else for that matter. From the CNHT studios in Concord, New Hampshire, just a few blocks from the New Hampshire State House, this is
Law Talk.
Oh, feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches. It's
Law Talk.
Not that long ago, the New Hampshire Union leader enthusiastically endorsed Governor Chris Christie for the Republican nomination for president. At the same time, the editorial staff at the paper, Grant Bossy, and publisher Joe McQuaid, were making a giant word salad with candidate Donald Trump, and the words were not entirely civil. After the magic first-in-the-nation New Hampshire primary fairy dust settled, Mr. Trump walked away with almost 5 times as many votes as Mr. Christie, with just over 100,000 compared to Governor Christie's 21,000. Donald Trump in first, Governor Christie in sixth. Governor Christie dropped out of the race after that, and after resounding Trump wins in South Carolina and Nevada, Governor Christie has endorsed Donald Trump for president. Speaking at a press conference before a Trump rally in Texas, Governor Christie said, "The best person to beat Hillary Clinton in November on that stage last night is undoubtedly Donald Trump. They do not know the playbook with Donald Trump because he is rewriting the playbook." Does that mean the union leader has effectively endorsed Trump, if only vicariously, through Chris Christie? New Hampshire Rebellion, the latest in a long line of front groups advancing the progressive war on free speech, has announced the winners of its Granny D Awards. Granny D is a famous New Hampshire Democrat who spent years trying to silence free speech under the false flag of campaign finance reform. New Hampshire Rebellion's champions of this ongoing effort include Democrat Congressman John Sarbanes from Maryland, listed in the announcement as a Democrat, North Carolina Congressman Walter Jones, listed as a Republican who happens to have a sketchy conservative review rating of only 76. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, no party affiliation listed. New Hampshire State Senator David Pierce, no party affiliation listed. 5 New Hampshire Rebellion volunteers, no party affiliation, and the founder of Americans for Campaign Reform, John Rao. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, famous for owning a safe house for out-of-state vote stealers in the historic vote fraud district of Portsmouth, is a career left-wing Democrat. State Senator Pierce is likewise. So why did New Hampshire Rebellion deliberately exclude that information, not just in the bullet list of winners at the top of the announcement, but in the wordy, praise-filled bios for each that followed? The obvious answer is that to include such information makes New Hampshire Rebellion look like what it is, a shadow project of the far left that uses the public funding of elections as a wedge issue to attract dopey, ill-informed Republicans as bipartisan cover, while they build a list of names they can call on for more aggressive campaign finance reform sorties in the future. And yes, as a matter of fact, we have the proof and we've published it. Go to GraniteRock.com and search for an article titled New Hampshire Rebellion's Many Progressive Bedfellows. And to all those Republicans I keep telling to distance themselves from this group, it's not too late to run away from them. Frank Adelblut, New Hampshire House Republican and candidate for governor, has an editorial in this morning's Union Leader. In it he says, "Some argue that if we cannot come up with another funding mechanism, that Obamacare Medicaid expansion will simply cease. We were told the same thing in 2013 when it was initially authorized. It is also in direct contradiction to those arguing for reauthorization today. Those same voices say that it would be immoral to give people health insurance and then take it away. If it were immoral today, would it not be immoral in 2018 after they have had the benefit for 4 years and not just 2? 3 more people died this week, and over a dozen were wounded thanks to gun-free zones and laws disarming law-abiding citizens. 90 minutes after being served with a restraining order, 38-year-old Cedric Larry Ford of Newton, Kansas, walked through the Kansas factory where he worked with an illegally obtained AKM carbine and a Glock pistol, randomly shooting his co-workers. The first good guy with a gun on the scene shot and killed Ford. Bob Owens, writing at BearingArms.com, observed that we need employers to recognize that concealed carriers are the most law-abiding citizens in the nation. We need employers to understand that these law-abiding citizens with firearms can save and have saved countless lives. And the so-called gun-free zones only serve to empower those sick souls who desire nothing more than to lash against the world in hate. A handgun left at home or locked in the console of an employee's car isn't going to do anyone any good when shots break out on a factory floor or on the other side of the cubicle wall. Gun-free zones get people killed. Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
Rock Talk.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Rock Talk.
Grok Talk, Grok Talk, Grok Talk. I got a room full of people here. I got Skip Murphy. I got Mike Rogers. I got Greg Moore. I got Ed Nail. I got myself. I'm the one doing the talking. But hey, all the microphones are on. We're happy to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to have Stacey McCain on, Robert Stacey McCain of Banned from Twitter fame, in about 20 minutes, so stay tuned for that. But right now we have a recurring guest, actually, now. Chrissy Harbin, who is the Director of Federal Affairs and Strategic Initiatives for Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the program.
Hey, Steve. Always great to be with you.
Good. Glad to have you here. Well, you know, we talk about Greg Moore every time we have you on, so we brought him in this time.
I know. It's a special treat. Hey, Greg.
Good morning, Chrissy. How's the weather down there?
It's warming up, thankfully.
Now, Chrissy is originally from Wisconsin, so the cold weather is nothing to her.
Some of these phones going up.
It's swimsuit weather here.
Oh, really?
In New Hampshire, Chrissy, when the weather goes above 25, the shorts come out.
It's true. That's true, especially if there's no wind.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes, that's pretty important. So Chrissy's here to talk to us about something going on in Utah.
Absolutely. This is something really concerning. Actually, it's happening in Utah and a number of other states across the country, and also here in Capitol Hill, and that issue is online sales taxes. It's something very concerning.
All right, we have, let's see. Okay, see you, Ed. Thanks. All righty. Ed's gone. Say goodbye to Ed, everybody. Bye, Ed.
Bye, Ed. Bye, Ed.
Utah, a Republican lawmaker, has proposed some legislation to, I can't find his name. You can tell me what his name is, to introduce a 4.7% sales tax on Internet commerce. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and his name is Senator Kurt Bramble. He's from Utah. He's actually also happens to be the president of the NCSL, the National Council of State Legislatures, which is a membership organization of state legislatures that has made it a priority to pass online sales tax legislation across the country. And this is a direct challenge to some Supreme Court decisions here in Washington that have said that a business has to be located within a state before it has to collect and remit sales taxes. And this is going to have this is going to pose a lot of problems to families and businesses.
Absolutely, and here in New Hampshire, we're one of the handful of states, along with some states like Delaware, Oregon, Alaska, that don't have a state sales tax. And this particular piece of legislation, coupled with another priority of the NCSL, which is the Marketplace Fairness Act, could have a huge impact on New Hampshire online retailers. Now, the Marketplace Fairness Act would be a disaster for New Hampshire online retailers because it would turn not only would they lose their competitive advantage of being in New Hampshire and not having to pay a sales tax, which is a huge issue because we want businesses to come here for that advantage, but secondarily it would turn the New Hampshire small businesses into the tax collectors for 9,600 county, state, and local taxing authorities across the country, which would be just a administrative disaster and a burden that frankly would make it nearly impossible for people to get by without buying a massive product from a company like, say, Amazon, who is a big supporter of this, as well as the first of all the advantage we have here. The bigger issue could be the House version that actually would basically say, well, New Hampshire, you don't have a state sales tax, so we're going to pretend you do and have you charge that tax instead. So maybe, Christy, you can address those bills.
Absolutely. At the federal level, what's really concerning about the initiatives at the federal level, namely the Marketplace Fairness Act or the Remote Transactions Parity Act that's sponsored by Representative Chase Fitz on the House side, is the fact that they will undermine tax competitiveness at the state level. So what do I mean by that? That means that state leaders choose the tax environments that they want to have. And in New Hampshire, you can see that state leaders made a decision to not enact a sales tax. And you can see how these different tax environments produce different economic results across the states. I think it's very clear in northeastern states because you can compare the progress in New Hampshire with states like New York, or Connecticut that have very different tax environments. So the problem with these bills, with the Marketplace Fairness Act and similar plans to enact taxes on online sales, is that they will force New Hampshire families to face a tax hike on online sales.
Yep. Yeah, I want to go back to something you said earlier about this Republican state senator participating with NCSL, which is a very progressive version of the conservative one, who now I'm having a senior moment. I can't remember the initials, but is always being, Zandra Rice Hawkins of Progress, Granite State Progress, is always down riding and making Alec, that's it. Always making sport of the legislation as if it was just absolutely evil. But here we see, more taxes coming out of this other one. I don't know how conservative the Republicans are in Utah, but the fact that you've got a Republican in this NCSL and the whole topic of, Trump's ruining the Republican brand, I look at stuff like this that is closer to home in each state where Republicans are acting against what they say they stand for is worse at ruining the brand.
It's funny how the Marketplace Fairness Act really moved forward under the leadership of the NCSL when former House Speaker Terry Norelli was the president of that organization.
Yeah. Gee, little connections there. But Chrissy, what do you see? Do you have any comments on what I just talked about? Not to just take us off into the wilderness.
Yeah, what's really concerning about these state efforts and these federal efforts to enact taxes on online sales is that really the biggest supporters for these are Republicans, the party that purports to be for limited government, that purports to be for low taxes, that purports to say that they want lower spending. But what we have here is a lot of what we hear often from Republicans who support these plans is a lot of politically charged talking points that really gloss over some of the direct and significant harms that they will pose to people. I think you could make an argument saying that states, if they want to, it's their prerogative to choose their tax environment. But the issue with these online sales tax plans that we're seeing right now is that they're an effort to tax outside their borders. What's happening here is that, faced with, with difficulties in revenue, faced with often budget deficits, we hear state legislators say that they want to enact an online sales tax on remote sellers instead of making the hard decisions to live within their means and make cuts elsewhere in their budget. So our position at Americans for Prosperity is that state legislators and the federal lawmakers should instead prioritize existing spending and not pass these online sales tax plans that pose a lot of constitutional problems.
But it's free money.
we get the same situation here, Chrissy, when people start talking about federal money, as if it sort of is airlifted in from a helicopter and dropped right in the middle of the State House, as if it didn't come from federal taxpayers. But it's as long as it's tax dollars that aren't coming from your citizens, it's somehow okay to basically raise taxes as long as the constituents that you have to face in November aren't the ones who have to pick up the tab.
But we are. We are all the time. Ay, ay, ay.
So, what is the? I know what we will say. I have to admit, Kelly Ayotte's actually good on this particular issue. She's been very strong against internet sales taxes and defending that particular part of the New Hampshire advantage. How does the rest of the landscape look as far as stopping this kind of stuff?
Well, unfortunately, we see a lot of support on Capitol Hill here in Washington. I know it's really disappointing. I have the vote count up here, and actually the Senate recently voted back in the 113th Congress. They voted on the Marketplace Fairness Act, and it passed overwhelmingly, 69 to 27. Now, obviously, the makeup of the Senate was a little different then, but it had overwhelming support from Republican legislators. Actually, 21 Senate Republicans voted in support of it, and only 22 voted against it. So clearly, they're split half and half. There's a lot of opposition among House leadership to pass the online sales tax plan. This would go through House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatt's committee, and he's an opponent of the Marketplace Fairness Act, so that's good. But clearly, the fact that there is such a split among congressional Republicans shows how important it is to contact your members of Congress and tell them that the MFA is bad policy and that you encourage them and their colleagues to oppose it.
Now, Chrissy, if a bill like either the Senate or the House version were to become law, can you talk a little bit about the impact it would have in states like New Hampshire who don't have a sales tax, how it would suddenly start putting pressure on legislatures in those states to say, hey, listen, if we're going to pay these taxes anyway, why not just pass a tax of our own?
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of unintended or maybe often intended consequences as a result of passing a federal online sales tax at the state level. And this is going to really open up a can of worms in states like New Hampshire that don't currently assess sales taxes. It remains to be seen how the legislature would react. And actually, since you're on the ground, Greg, I really defer to what you think the New Hampshire legislature would do. There's a lot of things. One is it could try to offset this tax increase elsewhere, but that seems less likely than creating some other sales taxes or some other taxes that would really just make it more convoluted. At the end of the day, what we're going to see is that these kinds of plans make the tax code more complicated, harder for people and small businesses to navigate, and it has a host of constitutional problems. So the short answer is I think we'll see a lawsuit. I think we'll see this make its way up to the Supreme Court. Hopefully we'll see maybe a non-sales tax states band together and bring a suit that shows how this harms their state. It remains to be seen what happens. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I unfortunately don't.
And so these are individual states voting to collect sales taxes on internet sales, correct?
Correct.
And what if the selling states simply refuse and say, never mind the Supreme Court, we don't care, and say, Commerce Department, do your job. Interstate taxation is illegal.
Yeah, I think these are some of the issues that would be certainly discussed as a what I think an eventual lawsuit would travel through the states. Very clearly, what's happening is that you would have people living in states that don't currently assess online sales taxes or sales taxes suddenly be opened up to the taxing jurisdiction made in other states. So in New Hampshire, remote sellers would all of a sudden have to comply with the higher sales tax structure in states like New York. So it's certainly very concerning. This would undermine tax competitiveness and essentially just be a logistical nightmare and a tax hike for people and businesses.
All right, Chrissy, we're out of time. Thanks again for being on the program. I'm sure we'll have you on again soon.
Absolutely. I hope so. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, you're welcome. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Chrissy.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh, click, click. Okay. In a second, you can call Mr. McCain.
I will.
You will. All right, this is Grok Talk. We'll be right back with Robert Stacy McCain, banned from Twitter. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. If you have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
All right. Welcome to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We had the chairman of CNHT here earlier. If you missed him, check it out on the podcast. Greg Moore is with us. He's our guest co-host today. Of course, Mike is at the end of the table. Skip Murphy is to my right, because I have to turn this way.
Yes, and I'm off camera.
And you're off camera. And Michelle Lavelle will be talking to her in a few minutes about some education bills. But before that, we have a guest. Thank you, Mike, for booking. A gentleman who has gotten a lot of chatter on the internet lately for getting banned from Twitter. Robert Stacy McCain, welcome to Grok Talk.
Great to be here.
Great to have you on, sir. All right, so Mike, your guest.
All right. So, Stacy's a well-respected journalist because he actually reports the facts like it is and doesn't pull any punches, which, of course, can cause controversy. Exactly the idea. So the last year or so, Stacy has noticed the increasing perversion in our society and the coalition, I think, between the social justice warriors and the LGBT types. So why don't you open it up from there, tell us what you've been covering and the kind of flack you've been getting and how it is that essentially Twitter has recruited your opponents to run the Safety and Security Council.
Thanks, Mike. Well, okay, on February 19th, my Twitter account was suspended. Immediately, conservatives started the hashtag Free Stacy. That's Free Stacy, no E. They started the hashtag Free Stacy to attempt to get me back on. Now, I had been on Twitter since 2009, during which time I had sent out more than 100,000 tweets. And wow. I was a frequent user, an active user, an innovative, I think, in many ways, user of the Twitter platform, going back, to, like I said, to 2009. I've tweeted from national debates, from conventions, both Republican and Democrat conventions. I've been out on the campaign trail, as you know, from Alaska to Florida, from New Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina, California, Nevada, all over the place. I've traveled and, have sent, messages covering campaigns. In the past 2 years, since early 2014, I have undertaken a deep study of radical feminism for my book, Sex Trouble, Radical Feminism, and the War Against Human Nature. Okay, and I published that a year ago in the first edition, and I'm working now to develop the revised and expanded second edition of Sex Trouble. And it is a book about radical feminism, and as you know, Mike, readers of my blog, theothermccain.com, are encouraged to hit the tip jar, to hit the PayPal donate button, to support the work that I'm doing. And it was my readers who encouraged me. After I'd written a couple of long pieces about feminism, they said, you ought to write a book, you ought to write a book, you ought to write a book. And I, having written books before, I know how much work goes into it, and I was dreading the work, but finally in July 2014, I yielded to the pressure and said, okay, I'll write the book. And I began publishing draft chapters as blog posts. And this was how I got on the feminist beat in 2014. And in August of 2014, the so-called Gamergate controversy erupted, where video game enthusiasts claimed that dishonest and unethical journalism was harming their industry, and the people behind that, the people who were attacking the video game industry, became known as social justice warriors, and one of the leaders among that was Anita Sarkeesian, who is a feminist radical who puts up videos doing feminist gender theory criticism of movies and games and TV shows, this, that, and the other. And she has been extremely controversial and has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars online for her projects for a non-profit tax-exempt organization called Feminist Frequency. On February 9th, it was announced that Anita Sarkeesian would be a member of what Twitter calls its Trust and Safety Council. And this, 10 days later, my account was suspended. Now, was this a coincidence or not? Well, there has been other critics of the social justice agenda who have complained of bias and suppression of conservative messages on Twitter. And as a result of this, the support for the hashtag #FreeStacey to get Twitter to reconsider its policies, has become a movement that has gotten international attention.
Well, yeah, and not only that, apparently it's normal for hashtags to autocomplete if they're frequently used, and Twitter has engineered that #FreeStacey does not autocomplete. Is that correct?
That's correct. As a matter of fact, the misspelling of my name, they have created a fake hashtag that does autocomplete. And like I said, it's #FreeStacey, and there is no E in Stacy.
Wow.
Yes, try it. Go on Twitter and try it, and it'll try to get you onto the fake hashtag #FreeStacey with an E.
Now I got
make them both trend. Damn it.
Yeah. Well, no. Twitchy. You know the website Twitchy.com,
Sure.
Started by Michelle Malkin. Well, Twitchy called attention to the fact that when it first started, the hashtag #FreeStacey was trending. It was clearly trending on Friday, February 19th, and at about 3 a.m. on Saturday morning, it was taken off. And so this is what some part of a pattern of behavior by the Twitter engineers that has been called shadow banning. Okay, an attempt to suppress conservative messages, and the manipulation of hashtags, the manipulation of trending, and the actual suppression of conservative tweets on the public timeline, so that people complain that they can't see their friends' tweets.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think that's true, because I don't use Twitter a lot, but lately I have been for the presidential debates, and I noticed that when I tweet out as GrenicRock.com with a hashtag NHPolitics, and I'm watching for those hashtags to come up, none of my tweets show up.
Yes.
None of them.
Yes.
Yeah. You like that?
Wow.
Yes. It is. I mean, it is clearly Twitter has taken sides in the political debate. It is a partisan organization that is actively trying to tilt the social media platform toward the Democrats to support Hillary Clinton's election. You know, Bernie Sanders supporters have claimed that they have been the victims of this kind of behavior. One of a Bernie Sanders supporters' account was actually suspended, and all the Sanders supporters, the Sanders campaign itself intervened to get that account restored.
It's just a case where you keep looking at this. Obviously, Facebook is run by Zuckerberg, who is BFFs with Obama and all of those folks. Google is the same way, with a lot of Google staffers now working within the Obama administration. Certainly worked in huge parts in the digital part of his campaigns. And is it a case where, why isn't in your estimation, Stacey, why the conservatives aren't coming up with alternatives? Because if they're going to balkanize the blogosphere right now, where else do we go, in your opinion?
Well, the thing is that Adam Baldwin, the actor, and who had more than 250,000 followers on Twitter, has stopped using Twitter. I actually spoke to him yesterday. And Baldwin says, Twitter is dead. Ace of Spades, as you know, one of the most popular independent conservative bloggers, Ace of Spades, has also announced that he's going to stop using Twitter. And as I said on my blog, I don't have anything personal against Twitter. From my standpoint as a journalist, I've been in this business 30 years now. Twitter is a tool in the same way a camera is a tool, a computer is a tool, and we have to use tools to do our job.
The same way radical feminists are tools? Oh, sorry.
Say what?
I said the same way.
It's been said that some of them use tools, but I don't
want to
get into that. The Hitachi magic wand, I believe it's one of the more popular tools.
I was afraid of this.
In the feminist community. But anyways...
this is a family blog, Stacey.
Not exactly. So back to Twitter tools.
All right. Well, the thing is, what they're probably teaching in public schools right now, the kids know what a Hitachi magic wand is before they get to high school. So, I hope I'm not offending anyone, but as I said, the Twitter is a tool. It is a tool that I immediately, as soon as someone said, "Hey man, are you on Twitter?" And I'm like, "What's Twitter?" And they said, "Oh man, you got to get on Twitter." Okay, so I log onto Twitter and I start following people and tweeting people and retweeting people, and that was back before you had the auto retweet function, where you actually had to put an RT at the front of it. And so much of what is done on Twitter, the users invented themselves, including the hashtag, including many other elements of the thing were developed by the users, and not by And one of the most popular hashtags, as you know, is TCOT, Top Conservatives on Twitter. You know, and this was one of the things, this, you know, at the time, and this is how early I adopted it, is that at the time to be considered TCOT, you had to have 100 followers. Okay, by 2012, I had 25,000 followers. In 2010, I actually got after a campaign, and you might remember this, Mike. I actually campaigned to try to get a retweet from Alyssa Milano, and this was a comical adventure that took me 9 months before I got some interaction there. But, you know, our late great friend, Andrew Breitbart, was a master of the use of Twitter. You know, and in the famous Wingergate scandal, it was Twitter what took him down, you know? And so it is a powerful tool, and Democrats want to use it to elect Hillary Clinton, period.
And the radical feminists on there, too, have an agenda, which is part of the reason that you got yourself into hot water with these folks, because I think you got a little tired of politics after the absolutely murderous 2012 cycle, and you happened on the some of the perversion that's occurring in our schools and in our society, and started covering it, and hence the studies in the book. So, you know, tell us a little bit more about that battle while we've got a few minutes left.
Okay. Well, as you said, if you go back to 2012, and as you know, I was all over the place on the campaign trail. I was up there in New Hampshire. We went, me and you, I believe, were there in Hollis when Rick Santorum arrived, and I shook hands and made peace with Rich Lowry, with whom I had previously gone to war, Rich Lowry of the National Journal. And so yes, you're right. I mean, after all the miles I put in on the campaign trail, start to finish in the 2012 campaign, I was ready to stay home, and I've been, I'm babysitting my grandsons here while I work some days. And
you got Skip grinning over that, because him and his wife are doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, you go all the way through a campaign, and both Democrat and Republican conventions, all those debates and everything like that, and it's wearying. Campaign work is a young man's game. It's very hard for a guy my age to be out there on the road all the time. So after I got back home, I was looking for something that I could report from home, and by a series of coincidences, in 2014, I began covering radical feminism as a regular beat, and my readers encouraged me to do this. Now, is the recent upsurge of radical feminism a coincidence? Of course, it's not. Okay, in 2012, Democrats used the claim of a Republican war on women to help Obama get reelected with the largest gender gap ever recorded by Gallup. It's a fact. Okay? Well, obviously, as soon as that election was over, Democrats knew that Hillary would be their nominee in 2016. It was a setup. Okay? It was predetermined that Hillary would be their next presidential candidate. And suddenly, remember, in September 2014, you had Emma Watson, the star of the Harry Potter movies, go up to the United Nations and give her speech about feminism. Then you had Beyonce on the Music Awards show in front of a giant lighted feminist, right? These were not coincidences. The liberal media establishment, the liberal political establishment, the liberal academic establishment, all are pushing the idea of feminism. Why? Because Democrats were preparing to nominate a woman as their candidate in 2016. So this upsurge that we've seen in the past 3 or 4 years of feminism as a message has a political motive. It has a partisan motive. It is all about electing Hillary Clinton. And so, I realized in 2014 that feminism would be a big story going forward. And I got on that story. Well, you know how I am, right, Mike? I go all in. I go gonzo.
Exactly. The second gonzo journalist in the world.
Stacy, we're going to have to cut in here because we're running out of time. How do people reach you?
TheOtherMcCain.com.
All right. Hey, I want to thank you for making time on short notice to come and talk to us today.
Really appreciate it, Stacy. We'll chat soon.
Thanks.
All righty. Bye-bye. Okay, quick break. We're going to come back with Michelle Lavelle. We're going to talk about some education stuff.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show.
Yeah, he doesn't even talk fast
Monday
enough to do the
Friday
Hog Report.
From 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW.
Because you got to fit a lot of
New Hampshire
information in that tiny little 1 minute window that they...
live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Need more grok
I love
talk?
that. I used to go, when I'd go surfing around the internet to look for radio to listen to, I'd grab stations in the South or wherever and get the Hog Report, find out what's going on with the cattle futures and all this other stuff.
Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.
Okay, we can talk about Croydon.
Croydon.
Talk about Croydon.
I thought you said Croydon.
We're talking about Croydon on the air because I turned my microphone on, so now we're talking about Croydon on the air.
Yeah?
And the Hog Report, yeah.
Already?
Yeah, hold on. How'd you like that? Talking on the air. Open microphone.
That would violate rule number 1.
We didn't do anything crazy on the break. We just
Turn our
talked
mics
about,
on.
They are on. We're talking. We were talking half the time Mike was on. We're talking about the Hog Report. It's awesome. It's the same as the show. It really is. There's no difference.
No, there isn't.
It's ADD from beginning to end.
So we're going to go from the Hog Report to Croydon. Thank you, Michelle, for coming in.
There's a segue.
Yeah, from the Hog Report to Croydon, because there's hogs in the state education establishment.
Trough is open.
The trough is open, and they're having some issues with the fact that Croydon doesn't want to line up at their trough, or doesn't want their students to have to.
No, as your listeners have been following along, the Croydon School Board implemented a school choice program that gives parents choice. Oh, no.
Freedom.
Scary. I know, what a scary concept, right? And they've been working its way through the court system now, and they have a date in the Superior Court coming up on March 9th up in Newport. And that's going to be really important because that's where they're going to actually finally make a decision whether or not this is kosher by statute.
Another person saying Yiddish. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I like that.
Well, all right. Being choice-oriented folks over here as far as education goes, we've looked at the law as written. Now, this is New Hampshire.
Here we go.
So what judges read and understand is never quite the same as what we do.
Seriously.
They're living
yes.
laws.
Cherish.
So when it says things like, you cherish.
Need that word.
So when it says things like, and I wrote a post about this after we interviewed them about this Croydon situation, and basically Croydon discovered that we have school choice in New Hampshire. It exists. It's already written into law. It just isn't being used. They're using it, and everybody's like, oh, my God.
Yes, that's exactly it. There are statutes already in place that allow schools to essentially tuition out their kids if they don't have the schools in their own district. So in Croydon's example, they offer K through 4. They already tuition out starting in grade 5. And all that Croydon's program does is allow parents to pick between the public school that they have an agreement with, their area agreement school, which is Newport.
How dare they?
I know, seriously. Or these private schools that actually are a savings to the town. So right now there are 4 kids.
Not giving money to unions? How dare they?
And these are
Have you no shame?
These are independent schools. They're non-religious, so it doesn't run afoul of the Blaine Amendment. But it's it's $4,000 per kid. With the 4 kids that are going to the Montessori school that they picked, that's $16,000 a year this year alone.
That's as much as Merrimack spends on one student.
Guilford's around 18 now. $18,000. Might as well just send them to private schools at this point.
That's huge money. And when I came to this country, upscale schools were considered to be $5,000 an average, which is about $3,000.
People tend to not even realize how much public schools cost because it's kind of like hidden in their property taxes. They don't realize what it's costing to educate the kids in their schools.
And not only this, when I was on my budget committee, I would always look at, here's our enrollment, here's how much we're spending, the math is easy. And the school board, in defending the budget, was always saying, oh, no, you can't do it that way because this, and this. And the number was always several thousands of dollars less.
Always.
Now, of course, then I just point out, okay, you've got one teacher, here's what they're making, usually above the median wage of the town in which they're teaching, and here's 30 students. 30,000, do the 30 times whatever the money is. You're talking about $250,000 to $500,000 a classroom.
And it's not going just to the teacher, but so where is it going? It's that what the Friedman Foundation calls administrative bloat.
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful thing when you think about they've done this longitudinal study across the country and by individual states to see exactly where that money's going. And it really isn't.
And I
to
have
the kids.
a very
it's
simple,
not to the classrooms.
I have a very simple question to ask, and it worked. It took me several years in Guilford to finally get them to understand what I was getting at. What is your indirect to direct labor cost? This is a well-known idea in manufacturers. What is your overhead? Not only how in head count, but in head count cost. And because of declining enrollment in Guilford, they finally had to start firing some of the administrators because, after 3 years of me asking this question and they're not doing anything, they were leaving themselves to hang.
You want to get yourself in trouble, and that's a good way. Write a blog post about how it costs less in tuition at UNH than it does to go to your local school.
Wow.
That's
like
not
that.
comparable, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, wait a second. It was $13,400 something for a year at UNH, right? That didn't include room and board. Or maybe it did, I don't remember. And then at the same time, it was $16,200 and something per student for public education.
And one of the things these towns like to do is they don't like to count the capital costs. They try to separate the capital
here's
costs
the thing.
out.
They're like,
It's a warrant
I'm like,
articles.
they're like, that doesn't count. That's not this. That I'm like, wait a minute.
But when you pay
if I take
a private
the entire
private school
budget,
has to count that.
all the money that you asked for to educate, scare quotes, children in our town, and I divide it by the number of children in our town who are using that service, I get a number, and it's larger than the cost of tuition at UNH.
But Steve, then how does UNH always seem to afford much better rock walls for the kids to climb on than the schools?
And new
schools.
logos and crazy. Anyway, let's get back to
Speakers.
You brought up declining enrollment.
Yeah.
That's happening across the state.
Yes.
And so why should districts be limited to supporting schools that are having fewer and fewer students? It's cost efficient for them to, right, look around and see how they can offer.
You do a graph, and when you get down to one student, it's going to cost you $260 billion.
You know why? A union official in my town exclaimed during the town meeting, this is several years ago, the enrollment may be down, but the needs are up.
Oh.
This is because teachers now see themselves as the true parents of the kids. I mean, I've got it on video where you've got teachers basically dissing the parents.
Yeah.
And my daughter-in-law is getting a degree in teaching, and they are explicitly being taught by these education professors, do not trust the parents.
How's that going, by the way? Because she's been at this for a couple of years now. Did she graduate yet?
She's kind of slowly going through. She's got 2 little ones at home, so this is an extended study.
And is she buying into that, or is she just telling you that because it's like... Because my son takes a photography class at NCC, and his professor... Well, he likes the class because it's Photoshop and stuff like that. And we had to buy him a $500 camera, which he likes, which I'm going to borrow. And it's nice camera. And he's like, oh, the guy's always going on about this and that and the crazy left flick. I said, don't get yourself in trouble. Keep your mind. He's like, I am. But even in the photography class,
yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And by the way, she listens to Grok Talk. Hi.
Oh, hey, hi. Hope everything's going good. But thanks for listening.
But it really is. We're seeing that used to be. It's no longer best summarized. It's no longer the teacher's desk with the apple on top. Ain't happening. It's like everything else that the left touches. It becomes politicized, and we're seeing schools turning into social justice warrior centers.
Well, the Croydon situation isn't necessarily a partisan issue. This started at the town
level.
Yes, it
is.
Mm-hmm. Well, it started at the town level.
Who controls who, and that is partisan.
She's talking about the people in the town who want to take advantage of it.
Were the ones who originated the idea several years ago. I want to say 7. They started way, way, way back. Went through this process with the Department of Ed, knowing full well what they planned, and it went through several votes at the town level before they implemented it with the 2014-15 school year. And I think that time they had 5 students, and it was last March that the DOE finally sent a letter to the Croydon School Board trying to put a stop to it. After this had been in motion for a long, long time, and then this fall, the Department of Ed tried to claim this sort of irreparable harm and sought an injunction. It was just insane. And when you listen to what the Attorney General said, and they represent the Department of Ed, they were saying that these students were irreparably harmed every day they were staying in those schools of choice.
Everybody going to Pinkerton Academy has been irreparably harmed for centuries.
And this makes no sense. There are like 5 or 6 or so different districts across the state that have different types of arrangements with private schools for tuition agreements. Some of them are private schools across state lines. Mm-hmm. So you tell me how this Croydon program is such an odd animal. It doesn't make sense when you look at the Department of Ed's arguments.
Is this going to
Freiburg Academy in Maine?
Yep. Does anybody think this is going to end up going up higher up outside the state?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I can't imagine. We know these judges. If you asked everybody in this room how they'd rule, we know that they're going to rule the wrong way.
Does it matter who is pushing the program? Because these are libertarian/free staters in Croydon that are pushing this external tuition.
Yes, but the blind justice shouldn't care.
Right, but
it's not blind.
It's very similar in some ways to a right to work situation where this creates, this is from their perspective, the camel's tent under the nose. This sort of represents an existential threat.
Camel's tent under the nose?
Something like that. Camel's nose under the tent.
We know what you meant. That's okay.
They have built a
rock shot.
There you go. That's the WTF.
We're gonna use that from now on. Camel's tent.
They have built a camel's tent right under our nose.
That's right. So no, but the education establishment views what Croydon is doing or could be doing as a potential existential threat, as a way of bypassing a lot of the regulations and a lot of the opportunities for unions to expand their power base.
And you're absolutely right. But going back to the politicization, I know you're talking about Croydon, but when you look at the political makeup of the school, of the Board of Education here in the state,
don't get me started.
That's where you go.
Yeah, we don't have time for that.
And you have a willy-nilly AG's office that's basically a lapdog saying, "Oh, who am I supposed to run after?" That's where everything has to do with government is political. I don't care anymore. Don't bring politics into it. Well, you're 1,000 years too late.
No, I do totally agree with you. When I saw the Attorney General have an attorney there for the public hearing on HB 1637, and that's the specific bill I want to bring to your listeners' attention. The House Education Committee is going to be voting on that Tuesday morning.
Which is, for our listeners?
It is the School Choice for Small Towns bill. It impacts not just Croydon, but 14 other small districts across this state. It's clarifying language that says it's not that school choice to contract with a private academy, that's the magic word that's used in statute, is not limited to the high school level. It would be applicable to any level at which the town or the district does not offer their own classes. When I've talked with the Croydon folks, and this makes so much sense, to provide an adequate education, why does that mean that the district has to be the producer of that education?
Absolutely, because they're cherishing their students.
They are providing the education.
They're cherishing the little cherubs.
You got to use their own words to fit it. For as nasty as adequate education is, or as cherish, but you don't have to be the producer of that education to provide it. And so in that way, the money can follow the child to the school of their choice. And in this Croydon example, it's private schools that are not religious. So it should already match up with what's allowed in statute. But 1637 has like two small words that would clarify it and clean this up once and for all of these little districts.
How's it looking?
Cherish union contracts. I think that's what they mean.
So let me ask, why Croydon? Why now? You say there have been contracts with outside of town borders, sometimes with private schools, sometimes across state lines, for years or decades.
Centuries.
Why Croydon? Why now?
I think Skip brought up a good point, and you brought up this point, Mike, that it's these libertarian free staters that are, I know, they're rocking the boat. And as you said, Greg, it is something that the DOE sees as a bigger threat. It's the David and Goliath kind of thing here. If Croydon is successful here, it creates this cascade effect.
Legal precedent.
Exactly. And that's what the DOE is so afraid of.
Yeah, that and because I was thinking back to the scholarship program.
Yeah.
And the buckets of money and the whole deal about the costs and all these taxes being diverted. And of course, I was making the same argument. You're already collecting $16,000 a year per student, whether the student attends or not, right? Because that's what you're doing. So really, if you have fewer students, you actually have more money.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. In your pot than less, because the percentage from the scholarship is so small.
Yes.
And you're not collecting that from the businesses. You're collecting it from property owners, unless they own property. But you know what I mean.
Exactly.
So I mean, it's like it's all about that huge pile of money to them, and it's not about the students, and it's not about cherishing, and it's not about adequate education. It's about maintaining a monopoly.
It is, and they don't want to let that competition in.
But I mean, I tell you, there's a little bit of short-sightedness here because they might follow this process down and get an adverse legal ruling against them. Because on the law, it's a pretty solid case. But here's the thing: if there's an adverse ruling against the DOE and the State Board of Education, they've basically opened Pandora's box for every small town. And particularly, it's going to be true as more free staters decide to move into more small towns.
Every town, isn't it? I mean, really,
exactly.
because it does. School choice exists in law. You can use that money to send your child anywhere in the state. It's already in law. They just don't want it advertised. And as you said, this will give us an opportunity to advertise.
Exactly. So in many ways, I mean, they might just the law of unintended consequences might be that more towns like, hey, this seems like a good idea. We should do it too. No one's going to do that until they see the outcome of the Croydon case.
We already know that other towns and districts are watching this very carefully. They've contacted the Croydon School Board members wanting to do the same thing, but they don't want to rock the boat. They're going to let Croydon take all the pressure and see what happens.
We got about a minute.
We need some amicus briefs here. Right, real quick. So you questioned why should the town be the producer? And the answer is the town doesn't need to be the producer of anything except the management of the town. And I draw attention to Reason.tv, Reason wrote many, many years ago about Sandy Springs, Georgia, a town that decided to privatize all their city services.
My brother lived in a town outside of Oklahoma City. Same thing. Everything's out.
And Reason.tv's got a little documentary on it. An excellent resource if you're not familiar with it.
All right, we got about 20 seconds.
So go to schoolchoicenh.org for more information on this important bill 1637 that the House will vote on, or the House Ed Committee will vote on Tuesday morning, plus several other important bills with the full contact information.
Looking good?
If you want to send us something.
Is it looking good?
Yeah.
If you want to send us something to post, just
sure.
shoot it my way and I'll
Absolutely
put it up.
will.
All right,
Thank you.
Grok Talk. We're done for this week. We'll be back next week. Same deal. Lots of people, lots of talking, lots of Grok Talk. Make sure you're here. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.
The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of CNHT, GraniteGrok.com, this station, or anyone else for that matter. Some of the content on this program is shared under the fair use provision of U.S. copyright law, found free in the public domain, or covered under Attribution 3.0. Some of the music on this program is provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Need more Grok Talk? Well, you can catch new shows Saturday mornings from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Miss a show? Not a problem. Past shows are rebroadcast here daily from 9 to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. Join us for 2 hours of unapologetic conservatism. And we're not just armed with opinions.